She had worked for him for 3 years. He had always been a reserved man, distant but respectful. That's why she never imagined he would have the nerve to make her that offer. Evelyn, what I'm about to ask you is going to sound insane. It's going to sound wrong, but I need you to hear me out. All of it. Please, just give me the chance to say it. She stood frozen. She had no idea where this was going. No sane person would do what he was about to propose. But when he finally finished talking, Evelyn couldn't respond. She just shook her head. Like saying it out loud made it even more real, even more absurd, but he was willing to do anything to get what he wanted. Alexander Cole was 38, self-made, an investment firm built from nothing, offices in 3 states. His name was on magazine covers, 40 under 40 lists, headlines about his fortune, his instincts, his vision. None of those headlines mentioned what was underneath. 5 years earlier, a truck, a red light it never stopped for. 1 second and everything changed. He woke up in a hospital bed and asked one question. Would he walk again? Nobody gave him a straight answer. Just therapy schedules, percentages, hope, measured out in decimals. The second thing he did, the moment he could speak, was look for Vanessa, his fiancée. 2 years of wedding planning, a house, a whole life mapped out. She was there, sitting by the bed, eyes swollen. But something in the way she looked at him had already changed. 3 weeks later, while he was still learning how to live in this new body, in this chair that was now part of him, Vanessa sat across from him and told him, voice breaking, that she couldn't do it. It's not that I don't love you, Alex, it's that I don't know if I can. I don't know if I'm the right person for this. And she left. No screaming, no slammed doors, just a silence that moved in and never left. From then on, Alexander built an empire, but he never let anyone get close again. No other relationships, no second chances. Every time someone tried to get close, he shut it down cold, the same way he'd close a bad deal. Not out of pride, out of fear. Fear of seeing that look again. The look of someone already saying goodbye even before they say the words. Over the years, that emptiness became something heavier. Alexander started thinking about everything he'd never have. A family, kids, someone to leave all of this to. He had over 30 companies under his name, and not a single person to leave them to. What Alexander didn't know, during all those quiet years, was that the answer was already living under his roof, cleaning his kitchen every night, without him ever once looking at her as anything more than an employee. Evelyn Hart was 30, grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where opportunity was something you heard about, not something you had. Since she was a kid, she'd wanted out, wanted to study, wanted to build her family a different life than the one she'd had. At 25, she made the hardest call of her life. Leave home, leave her parents, move east to New York, study nursing, and work full-time to pay for it. She landed the housekeeping job at Alexander's estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, through a staffing agency. Mornings only at first. Then he noticed how serious she was, how punctual, how she moved through that house like she respected every inch of it. He hired her full-time. She lived in the guest cottage near the pool. Small, modest, but it meant no rent. More saved for tuition, more sent home, more toward the loans stacking up every semester. She studied at night, worked all day, slept in the gaps, never once complained. Nobody in that house knew her exhausting routine was about to change forever, and that the change wouldn't come from school or a raise. It would come from a question neither of them saw coming. Alexander started watching her without meaning to, watching her come home wiped out from clinicals and still make dinner with a smile, watching her study at the kitchen table late at night, cold coffee at her elbow, notebook full of scribbles, and little by little, without looking for it, he started to admire her. Not the way a man admires a woman he's attracted to, at least, not at first. He admired her the way you admire someone who refuses to quit, the way you admire strength you lost a long time ago. One night, working late in his study, Alexander heard a noise in the kitchen, almost 11. He rolled down the hall and found Evelyn sitting on the floor back against the cabinets, crying quietly, phone in her hand. Evelyn? She wiped her face fast, embarrassed. Sorry, Mr. Cole. I was just heading to bed. What happened? She hesitated. But something in his eyes that night was different. Not the boss demanding an explanation. Someone who actually wanted to know. My dad. He's sick. He needs surgery and we can't afford it. Alexander didn't say anything right away. He just nodded, told her to get some rest, and rolled back to his room. The next morning, without a word, he wired the exact amount she needed straight to her account. She tried to give it back, argued with him, told him she couldn't accept it, that it felt wrong, that she'd owe him too much. "It's not a loan, Evelyn. It's a gift. We're not discussing this again." That was the moment, though neither of them said it out loud, when something between them shifted. Months passed. Evelyn kept working, studying, grinding. Alexander kept watching her, and an idea kept growing in him, one that at first felt insane, one he tried to ignore for weeks, until one night he couldn't ignore it anymore. He called her into his study, asked her to sit, and with his hands actually shaking, something that never happened in his hardest business meetings, he said the words that opened this story. "Evelyn, what I'm about to ask you is going to sound insane." And then, after the pause, after the silence, after she stood there frozen, not understanding where this was going, Alexander finished. He explained that because of his condition, he couldn't have children the traditional way. He explained he'd looked into it, talked to specialists, that there was a medical procedure, IVF, a gestational arrangement, that would let him become a father without any kind of physical relationship involved. He explained that he wanted her to be the one to carry his child. In exchange, he'd give her a house, fully paid off in her name, enough money to finish nursing school debt-free, pay off everything she owed, and support her family for good. Evelyn stood in silence for what felt to Alexander like forever. "You're asking me to have your baby for money. I know how it sounds." "No, Mr. Cole, I really don't think you do." She stood up, eyes flashing with a mix of anger and confusion. "I'm not a rental. I can't just hand over a life because someone's willing to pay for it. I'm not asking you to hand anything over. I'm asking you to give me the one thing I'll never have any other way, the chance to be a father. That's not my responsibility." "I know." "Then why?" "Because there's no one else I could ask, Evelyn. In all these years, there hasn't been a single person I trust the way I trust you." She walked out that night without another word. For days afterward, she barely looked at him. Alexander didn't bring it up again, didn't push, but Evelyn could feel the weight of it in every room of that house, in every awkward silence, every time they passed each other in the hall. A week later, her mom called. Her dad had relapsed. They needed more than she could scrape together between 2 jobs and student loans that were already choking her. She didn't sleep that night. She thought about her father, about the years she'd spent fighting alone in a city that wasn't home, about the nights she'd cried herself to sleep from exhaustion, fear, loneliness, and she thought about Alexander, a man with all the money in the world who looked just as alone as she felt most nights. The next morning she knocked on his study door. "I want to talk." He looked up, surprised. "I have conditions," and that's how, with a mix of need, moral doubt that would follow her for months, and his promise to always treat her with respect and dignity, Evelyn said yes. It wasn't easy. It wasn't a decision she made lightly. It was made through tears, through calculations of what that money could mean for the people she loved, and through a question that would follow her through the first months of pregnancy. Was this the right thing to do? The procedure happened at a private clinic, quiet, under a legal contract drafted by Alexander's lawyers, spelling out every term, the house, the money, and, above all, each person's legal rights over the baby, or babies, if it worked. Evelyn's hands shook as she signed every page. Then came the wait, and in that wait, something neither of them planned started to shift. Alexander asked her to move out of the guest cottage and into the main house, into the room next to his. "So it's easier for the doctor when he comes for checkups." Evelyn didn't argue. If she was honest, she was almost relieved not to sleep alone. The first days were tense and quiet. Neither of them knew how to act. But soon Alexander's anxiety over whether the procedure worked started showing up in ways even he didn't expect. One night, Evelyn got up to use the bathroom. She opened her door and jumped. Alexander was right there in the hallway, chair parked outside her door, waiting. "Are you okay? Are you throwing up? Don't worry, I looked it up. It's totally normal this early." She just stared at him, somewhere between shock and laughter. "Mr. Cole, we don't even know if I'm pregnant yet. And another thing, it's been 3 days since the procedure. I'm pretty sure that's not why I'm up." He went quiet for a second, and for the first time in a long time, she saw him smile like he actually felt dumb. "You're right. Sorry. I have no idea how I'm supposed to act through this. You could start by sleeping. It's 3 in the morning. He nodded, a little red-faced, and rolled back to his room. But the scene repeated, with small variations over the next few weeks. Every creak in the house, Every time Evelyn got up, there he was, asking if she was okay. A few days later came a moment she'd remember forever with a laugh. She got up early, same as always, ready to start her usual chores, because despite the deal, she'd insisted on keeping her job as long as she felt up to it. She walked into the kitchen and froze. Alexander, parked at the sink, washing dishes with zero coordination, water everywhere. "Sir, what are you doing?" "Washing dishes. We agreed I'd keep working, remember?" Right, I just washed a couple dishes for no reason and made coffee and made you a smoothie." He pointed to a glass with a suspicious-looking liquid on the counter. She raised an eyebrow, tried it more out of curiosity than trust. It was so bad she nearly gagged for real, and this time it had nothing to do with pregnancy. "Mr. Cole, what did you put in this?" "Banana, spinach, some protein powder and honey, and lemon." "That too. That explains a lot." They both ended up laughing. One of those small moments where for a second the contract and the conditions and the whole arrangement disappeared, and there were just two people sharing an awkward, honest morning. "I'll try again tomorrow," he said, still smiling. "I'll ask my assistant for a recipe. She knows this stuff." "No, please. Let your assistant give the recipe to someone who actually knows how to cook. You stick to what you're good at." "And what's that?" "I don't know. Business. Signing things. Whatever it is you do in that office all day." He put a hand to his chest, feigning injury. Ouch. Less painful than that smoothie. That little back and forth turned into a habit neither of them planned. Every morning Alexander tried something new, a juice, a tea, a shake. And every morning Evelyn tried it with equal parts dread and affection, usually spitting it out the second he turned away. But after 2 weeks of failures, he finally nailed a strawberry banana smoothie that, to both their surprise, was actually good. This is good." "Really?" "Really." He grinned like he'd just closed the biggest deal of his career. "I'm writing this down. Don't forget it, Mr. Cole. This is the only one you've gotten right. I'll make it every day then." "Absolutely not. I'll be sick of it in a week." They laughed again, and that shared laughter, small and everyday, slowly became the quiet language growing between them. 3 weeks later, the pregnancy test confirmed what they'd both been waiting for, with very different feelings attached. Evelyn was pregnant. When the doctor told him, Alexander sat in silence for several seconds. Then, without meaning to, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm going to be a father." He said it, like he still couldn't believe it. Evelyn watched him from the exam table, and for the first time she felt that decision, made through tears and necessity, starting to become something else. Something that didn't have a name yet, but no longer felt like a business arrangement. The following weeks brought new symptoms, strange cravings, and new clumsy attempts by Alexander to learn to cook things that wouldn't make her sick. The house, once huge and empty, started filling up with laughter. At one of her checkups, the doctor stared at the ultrasound screen a little longer than usual. "Well, this is going to be a surprise." Alexander tensed immediately. "Is something wrong?" No, nothing's wrong. It's just, there are two." "Two what?" "Babies, Mr. Cole. You're having twins." The silence that followed was unlike any silence they'd shared before. Alexander took Evelyn's hand without thinking, a pure reflex, and she, surprised, didn't pull away. Twins. Twins. They both said it again, like they needed to hear it twice to believe it. The twin news brought new problems, not medical ones, social ones. Alexander's family, mostly his mother, a sharp-tongued woman who never held back an opinion, found out about the arrangement and wasted no time voicing her disapproval. "Do you have any idea what people are going to say, Alexander? Your housekeeper, pregnant with your child, living in your house. They're going to think she took advantage of your condition to get money out of you." "She didn't take advantage of anything, Mum," I asked her. "That doesn't matter. What matters is how it looks, and trust me, it looks bad." In the business world, rumors spread fast. Some colleagues joked, not so quietly, about the housekeeper who landed the boss. Others were more direct, warning Alexander to be careful, that women like that knew exactly what they were doing. Evelyn faced something similar at school. At first, she hid the pregnancy under loose clothing, but as the months went on, and her belly, bigger than usual given the twins, became impossible to hide, the whispers among classmates started piling up. "Did you hear? They're saying it's her boss's baby, the businessman, the one who's always in the news. I heard she got pregnant on purpose to get his money." Evelyn pretended not to hear, kept her head down, sat in the back, tried to focus on her notes while feeling every stare land on her stomach. Every whisper hit her back like needles. One afternoon she couldn't take it anymore and walked out of class early, Eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall in front of anyone. Alexander, who'd come to pick her up because her last appointment ran long, found her sitting on a bench in the parking lot, hands over her belly, staring at nothing. What happened? Nothing. Let's just go. Evelyn. She finally looked at him, and everything she'd been holding in broke loose. Everyone thinks I'm some gold digger, that I planned this, that I'm just some girl who took advantage of the fact that you have money. Don't listen to them. Easy to say when you're not the one hearing it. Alexander went quiet for a moment, then with a resolve she'd never seen in him before said, "Then let's make them stop talking." The next day, without warning, he sat down for an interview with a well-known business outlet and, without sharing anything medical or private, made it absolutely clear that Evelyn was no opportunist, that the decision had been entirely his, that he respected her deeply, and that anyone who came after her would be treated as coming after him and his children. The gossip didn't disappear completely, it never does, but it quieted down, and for the first time in weeks, Evelyn felt like she wasn't fighting that battle alone. It was around then that whatever was growing between them became impossible to keep ignoring. Evelyn started noticing things. Alexander spending less time locked in his office, saying yes to invitations he used to turn down automatically, laughing more. She started encouraging him to get out, to sit with her in the backyard and watch the sunset instead of drowning in quarterly reports. "Did you go out a lot before the accident?" she asked one evening, watching the sky turn orange from the porch. "All the time. Parties, trips, meetings. I just stopped feeling like I belonged in that world anymore. And now?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Now I'm starting to think maybe I still do, just differently." Evelyn smiled, and without really planning it, rested her hand on his, on the arm of his chair. "Life doesn't end because it looks different, Mr. Cole. It just changes shape." That small gesture, that sentence, stayed with them both for days. Meanwhile, at the office, another story was unfolding in the shadows. Marcus Doyle, Alexander's co-founder since day one, had been in a years-long relationship with Vanessa, Alexander's ex-fiancée. It was never exactly a secret, though nobody talked about it out loud either. Over time, the partnership between Alexander and Marcus had grown tense, held together more by legal obligation than actual trust. Marcus watched Evelyn's growing presence in Alexander's life with real concern, not jealousy, fear. Fear that anyone getting close to Alexander's personal life might stumble onto the financial irregularities he'd been quietly running for 2 years, funneling company money into shell accounts labeled strategic investments that were never properly reported. Weeks before the pregnancy went public, in a board meeting, Marcus had pushed almost too hard for Alexander to delegate more of the financial oversight to cut down on stress, given everything going on. Alexander, distracted by the babies on the way, agreed. Without realizing, it handed Marcus even more control over the company's finances. It was Evelyn, without meaning to, who found the first clue. One afternoon, straightening papers Alexander had left on the dining table, something she still did out of habit, not curiosity, she noticed a folder with a company logo she didn't recognize, mixed in with the quarterly reports. "Mr. Cole, this doesn't belong in here, does it?" Alexander took the folder, flipped through it, frowning. "This isn't mine. Must be Marcus's. He was probably here last week." He set it aside without thinking much of it. But that night, something didn't sit right. The next day, he quietly asked his internal audit team to look into the company he didn't recognize. It was the start of something that would take weeks to fully come to light. Meanwhile, Evelyn was fighting a quieter battle of her own, one that had nothing to do with money or business, and everything to do with something she could barely name, even to herself. Over coffee with Sarah, her one close friend in the city, a classmate from nursing school, she finally let the doubts she'd been carrying spill out. "Sarah, is it wrong that I don't see this as just a contract anymore?" "What do you mean?" "At first, this was simple. I'd carry the babies, get paid, and legally they'd be his. But now, every time I feel them move, every time I dream about them, I can't stand the thought of handing them over like some kind of delivery." "Evelyn, you're not handing anything over. You're still going to be their mum. A contract doesn't change that. Legally it does. I signed papers giving up certain rights in exchange for the house and the money. If something ever went wrong between me and Alexander, I don't know what would happen. I don't know if I'd have any rights to my own kids." Sarah went quiet, took her hand. "What does your gut tell you?" "My gut tells me I can't imagine my life without them anymore, or without him." "Then maybe it's time to talk to Alexander." not as his employee, not as the woman in the contract, as the mother of his children. That conversation stuck with Evelyn for days, and it's part of what pushed her to finally be honest with Alexander in the weeks that followed, when she worked up the nerve to ask him directly what would happen legally once the babies were born. Without hesitation, Alexander called his lawyers that same week and rewrote the contract, stripped out every clause that limited Evelyn's rights, and recognized her, formally and legally, as a full parent. No conditions attached to the house or the money. This should have never depended on a piece of paper, Evelyn. I'm sorry I didn't think of it sooner. That gesture, more than any romantic words, was what started breaking down the wall Evelyn had been keeping between what she felt and what she let herself feel. As the investigation into Marcus quietly moved forward, Alexander and Evelyn's life kept shifting. The pregnancy moved along normally. Checkups, strange cravings. Evelyn developed an obsession with mango and chili that always made Alexander laugh, and a closeness anyone watching them could see plainly by now. One day, leaving campus, Evelyn stayed behind talking to a classmate, Nathan, who'd helped her with notes more than once during the weeks morning sickness kept her home. Alexander, waiting in the car, watched them from a distance for a few seconds before getting out. Something tightened in his chest watching how easily this guy made her laugh. When she finally got in the car, Alexander drove in tense silence the whole way. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." "Who was that?" She looked at him, caught off guard by his tone. "Nathan?" "A classmate. He's helped me a lot these past few months." "Ah. Are you jealous, Mr. Cole?" "Of course not." But the silence that followed and the way he avoided her eyes the rest of the ride said a lot more than his words were willing to admit. That night at dinner, Evelyn brought it up again. "Why'd you get like that today?" Alexander sighed, setting down his fork. "I don't know, Evelyn. I don't have any right to feel that. You don't owe me an explanation for who you talk to, but you still felt it." He looked her straight in the eye and for once didn't dodge. "Yeah, I did." Neither of them said anything else that night, but they both knew that whatever this was, it couldn't keep being called an arrangement. The next day, Evelyn decided she wasn't leaving things like that. After her last class, instead of waiting for Alexander to pull up in silence like the day before, she walked straight to the car and got in before he could drive off. "Alexander, we can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" "Bottling up the important stuff. You get upset, I pretend I don't care, and we both just act like nothing happened. Not anymore." Alexander cut the engine, staring straight ahead, hands on the wheel. "You're right. I'm sorry about yesterday. I had no right to act like that." "It's not that you didn't have the right to feel it. You had the right to tell me, instead of holding it in." He looked at her, caught off guard by how clearly she said it. "What if I tell you now?" "Tell me." "I got scared thinking that eventually you'd find someone who could walk toward you without needing help for anything. Someone simpler, someone without all this baggage I carry." Evelyn listened in silence, and when he finished, she took his hand firmly. "Alexander, if I wanted simple, I wouldn't have said yes to any of this in the first place. Nathan's just a classmate who lent me notes. You're the man who waits up in case I get sick, who learned to cook just to take care of me, who went on record in front of the whole business world to defend me. That's not simple, but it's real." That day, for the first time, neither of them felt the need to pretend this was just an arrangement between an employer and his employee. Something had quietly shifted between them, even if it would still be weeks before either of them dared to name it. The following weeks brought the hardest part of the pregnancy. Evelyn, 7 months along, woke up one night with a sharp pain in her stomach and, getting up, found blood on the sheets. She froze for a second that felt endless, unable to move, unable to scream, like her body had forgotten how to react. Then instinct took over. "Alexander!" Her voice came out cracked, almost unrecognizable. He was there in seconds, still in his pajamas, hair a mess, wheeling himself down the hall with a speed that seemed impossible. "What happened? Evelyn, what?" He didn't finish the question. He saw the blood, and something in his face changed completely, like the floor had dropped out from under him. "We're going to the hospital. Now." "Alexander, I'm scared." "I know. Me too. But I'm not letting go of your hand, you hear me? Not for a second." The house filled with a panic neither of them had ever felt before. Alexander personally made sure they got to Greenwich Lakeview Hospital in record time, calling out directions to the driver, holding Evelyn's hand the entire way while she, pale and terrified, kept whispering, "Nothing can happen to them. Nothing can happen to them. Nothing's going to happen to any of the three of you. I promise. Don't promise something that's not up to you. Then I'm asking you, hold on. All three of you, hold on. When they arrived, a team of nurses rushed Evelyn back almost at a run, and for the first time since the accident, Alexander was the one left behind, stuck, unable to follow, watching the ER doors close between them. In the waiting room, while the doctors worked on Evelyn, Alexander sat with his hands clasped so tight his knuckles went white, praying, something he hadn't done in years. The minutes crawled by like hours. Every time a door opened, his head snapped up. Every time it wasn't for him, something in his chest emptied out a little more. He thought about Vanessa, about the day she left. He thought maybe this was some kind of punishment, the universe collecting on the debt for daring to hope for something good again, after all these years. Please, don't take them from me. Don't take her from me either. He said it almost without a voice, head down, talking to no one and everyone at once. A nurse passing by caught the words and understood in that instant far more than that man, sitting in a wheelchair, face wrecked with fear, would ever admit out loud to another person. An hour passed, then another. Alexander lost track of time, caught between fear and a silence that felt like a sentence. When a doctor finally walked through the door and headed straight for him, Alexander felt like he couldn't breathe. "Mr. Cole, tell me, please, tell me now." Reading the urgency in his eyes, the doctor didn't make him wait. "The babies are fine. Evelyn's fine. She had a partial placental abruption caught in time. She'll need full bed rest for the next few weeks, but there's no reason to think this will happen again if she follows the instructions." Alexander felt like he could breathe again for the first time in hours. The tears he'd been holding back all night finally came, and he didn't care who saw. "Can I see her?" "In a few minutes. She's coming out of sedation." Those minutes were maybe the longest of the whole night. When he was finally allowed in, Alexander rolled toward the bed slowly, like any sudden movement might shatter whatever fragile calm was left. He found Evelyn awake, one hand on her belly, eyes full of tears. "I thought I lost them. They're okay. You're okay." "I was so scared, Alexander." He took her hand, pressing his forehead to it, not caring that the tears kept coming. "Me too. You have no idea." Evelyn looked at him, and through the tears, said something she'd been holding on to for weeks. "I was so scared, and not just for them. I was scared thinking that if something happened, I wouldn't know how to keep going. I love them, Alexander. I can't think of them as anything but mine anymore." It was the first time she'd called him by his first name, without the mister that always kept a little distance between them. Alexander took her hand, voice breaking. "They were never just mine, Evelyn. From day one, they were ours. And if something had happened tonight, I don't know if you and I would have survived that, either of us. It didn't happen. We're here. All three of you are here." She closed her eyes, exhausted, but for the first time in hours, calm. And Alexander stayed right there, holding her hand, never letting go until the sun came up through the hospital window. 2 days later, back home, Evelyn found him sitting by her bed with a tray of food he'd clearly made himself. "This again. It's soup. You can't mess up soup." She took a bite and immediately made a face. "Alexander, you put cinnamon in this. I read it helps with nausea. Nothing helps with this. Not even a miracle could save this soup." He laughed, maybe for the first time since that night at the hospital, a real laugh that shook his shoulders. "At least you're not throwing up from fear anymore. Now it's from my cooking. Progress, I guess." They sat there laughing, the abandoned soup between them, enjoying a little bit of normal after the hardest night they'd shared. The weeks of bed rest that followed brought them closer in a way neither of them could keep denying. Alexander practically moved into her room, bringing books, food, company. Through the long hours she couldn't leave the bed. It was during one of those afternoons, half watching a movie neither of them was paying attention to, that it finally happened. Evelyn looked at him. He looked back, and without either of them planning it, their faces drifted closer until their lips met in a slow kiss, carrying everything they'd both been holding back for months. When they pulled apart, Alexander looked down instead of smiling. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I crossed a line." "No, Evelyn, you don't owe me anything because of the contract or—" "No, Alexander, listen to me. Don't apologize. I wanted that too." He looked at her, stunned. "I love you," she said, with a clarity that left no room for doubt. "And I don't know exactly when it started, but I can't keep pretending this is just an arrangement anymore." Something in Alexander's chest tightened, different from every fear he'd carried for years. You can't love me, Evelyn. Why not? Because I come with limitations you don't deserve to carry. Because I can't walk toward you. Because I can't give you a normal life, because one day you're going to look at me and see exactly what Vanessa saw. I'm not Vanessa. I know, but no. Listen to me, Alexander Cole. I don't love you despite the wheelchair, or out of pity or gratitude. I love you for how you take care of our kids before they're even born. I love you for waiting outside the bathroom because you were scared something might happen to me. I love you for learning to wash dishes and make terrible smoothies just to feel like you were doing something for me. I love the man you are, not the man you stopped being after the accident. Alexander couldn't hold back the tears. I'm scared that one day you'll get tired of this. And I'm scared you'll never give yourself the chance to let me try. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the silence of two people who, after months of doubt and pretending, were finally being honest with each other. The weeks that followed also brought resolution to the other conflict that had been building quietly. The internal audit came back with hard evidence. Marcus Doyle had been siphoning company funds for almost 2 years, using shell companies to disguise investments that went straight into his own accounts, taking full advantage of the stretch when Alexander, distracted by the twins on the way, had handed over more control. Alexander called Marcus into his office. No warning, a Tuesday morning. When Marcus walked in, smiling as usual, something in Alexander's face stopped him mid-step. Everything okay? Alexander slid a folder across the desk without a word. Marcus opened it, read it, watched the color drain from his own face, line by line. Alex, this can be explained. Then explain it. They were investments that didn't pan out the way I planned. I was going to pay it back, I swear. I just needed time. 2 years, Marcus. 2 years of pulling money out of this company. Right when I was the most distracted, the most vulnerable, dealing with my kids on the way. That's just a coincidence. It wasn't planned like that. The debt got out of control. Vanessa, don't you dare bring her into this as an excuse. It's the truth, Alex. She spends and spends and it's never enough. I was just trying to keep things afloat. You were my partner for years, practically my brother. I trusted you with everything I built, and you took advantage of the worst moment of my life to steal from me. Alex, please, we can work this out between us. It doesn't have to go further. It already went further. The lawyers have everything. The board has everything. And as of today, you're done here. You can't do this to me. I can, and I am. Marcus stood there, silent, searching for something that might change what was already decided. He didn't find it. Without another word, he grabbed the folder, turned, and walked out of the office for the last time. Legally, Alexander had everything he needed to remove him from the company and move forward with charges, which he did without hesitation, closing the door on a partnership that had run out of trust a long time ago. With Marcus gone, and with Alexander and Evelyn finally honest with each other about what they felt, the story moved into its final chapter. The twins were born 2 months later, on a rainy afternoon Alexander would remember as the most important moment of his life. A boy and a girl, healthy, strong, crying with the same intensity their parents had cried with happiness in the delivery room. Alexander held them, one in each arm, hands shaking, and for the first time since the accident, felt like his life wasn't defined by what he'd lost, but by everything he'd finally gained. Evelyn watched from the bed, exhausted but glowing, seeing this man who once thought he'd never find his way to love, holding his children with a tenderness that erased any doubt about the kind of father he'd be. The first months at home with the twins brought the usual chaos. Sleepless nights, crying in stereo, diapers, bottles, and a partnership between Alexander and Evelyn that got stronger with every challenge they faced together. Alexander's family, watching Evelyn's genuine devotion, softened. Even his mother, so resistant at first, melted the first time she held her grandkids. A year after the twins were born, in the backyard of the same house where it all began, under the same tree where Evelyn had once told him that life doesn't end just because it looks different, it just changes shape. Alexander, surrounded only by his closest family, no fanfare at all, asked her to marry him. "We did this whole thing backwards," he said, the twins playing nearby on the grass. "They came first, then came the love we didn't see coming from the start. Now there's just one thing missing." Evelyn, eyes full of tears, didn't need to think about it for even a second. Yes, they got married months later in a small intimate ceremony. No press this time, no partners who once doubted her. Just family. Just the people who'd watched, day by day, Something that started as a desperate arrangement turned into the most honest family either of them could have imagined. Evelyn finished nursing school months after that, with Alexander in the front row at graduation, clapping just as hard as he clapped for every milestone his kids hit. And Alexander, the man who once believed he no longer belonged anywhere after the accident, finally understood that life doesn't always give back what you lost in the same shape you had it before. Sometimes it just gives you something different, something that, if you're brave enough to accept it, turns out to be so much bigger than you ever thought you deserved. If this story got to you, let us know in the comments and rate it from 0 to 10.